Minister, when the pillar banks and indeed the European Central Bank came calling for access to Ireland's cash in 2008, they were given that access. It cost the Irish state dearly, and it will go on costing the Irish state dearly for generations to come, as our children and grandchildren remain saddled with hundreds of millions in debt that they had no hand, act or part in incurring. I have no great interest or desire to rehash the past, however, but I do mention this because it highlights in dramatic fashion the social and financial debt that banks have with Irish society. We rightly demand a lot from them because a lot was given to them. When they were on the verge of collapse, the Irish people stumped up and covered their reckless losses. There should then be a willingness on the part of the pillar banks to honour the social contract between communities and banks. Instead, what we have seen is a reduction of services, increased charges, mortgage rates overcharging, debt write-downs for the elite. Our motion today reflects some of these issues as a kind of background to the main issue, but it also develops a series of concerns that arose in dramatic fashion last year when all of us here, including government, were apparently blindsided by the decision of AIB to effectively make dozens of its branches cashless operations. I didn't see much condemnation of AIB or enough condemnation of that from government, and I remember at the time it was my colleagues here in the Rural Independent Group who took a stand and who went to the headquarters of AIB to demand action and to demand an end to the cashless society that they were trying to impose on us. In those very actions. I do think that it's important that there's proper oversight and regulation at all times of these banks, because it's not good enough for government TDs to say they didn't know, and that's what was being said that summer. I distinctly remember that was said, you know. The startled reaction of the then Minister for Finance, who was clearly not deemed important enough by the bank to be kept in the loop, was embarrassing enough, as was the frantic political reaction and the desire to avoid the impression that once again the banks had overstepped the mark and abused their positions of market dominance. I and my colleagues are here today to put a halt to the bank's gallop and to the mad rush to force everyone into digitalised or electronic methods of payments, even when the expressed wish of most people is that we would have the freedom to use cash and, you know, when needed and when they desire to use it. Of course, there is a drive and a greater take-up of electronic forms of payment, but let's not fool ourselves. This is not because of some great desire to do everything online. Much of it is driven by the charges being demanded from banks, from businesses and individuals lodging their own money. Let us take Bank of Ireland as an example, who in 2021 closed its branches in Edenderry, Banagher and Clara, along with 85 other outlets across the country as part of the bank's ongoing transition to digital banking. For notes lodged withdrawn, a person or business can be charged 60 cents per €100, but if notes are exchanged, that cost rises to €1.20 per €100. For the privilege of coin handling, the cost rises again to €3 per 100. When these figures are taken cumulatively, they give rise to levels of costs that place a real strain on people. The banks do not want your coins. They do not say that, of course, well, at least not explicitly, but they tell you that in other ways by the fees they charge. If the government announced tomorrow that it was placing an additional €3 tax on every €100 earned, there would be uproar, and rightly so. The banks do it, and we are just meant to say, oh well, that is the price you pay for the privilege of doing business with us. That seems to be the attitude. Our motion reflects the very real fears and concerns that people have with respect to digital surveillance of their finances. This is not some kind of conspiracy theory or paranoid fantasy. It is very real and a very legitimate concern that says there is now almost no area of human activity or human life that is not vulnerable to financial or governmental monitoring of one kind or another. Physical cash offers privacy in a way that electronic cash can never offer. This is important for people, and it ought to be maintained. It also offers our older people relief from having to navigate the online financial world. And we know from a report by Age Action Ireland that over half of Irish people aged between 65 and 74 have never used the internet. Age Action also points to the fact that although Ireland has an international brand as a tech leader and it's home to some of the world's biggest brands, current levels of digital literacy among older people continue to lag far behind our nearest neighbour and comparable EU states. Our post office network also is very dear and precious to rural communities. Let's not undermine them in any way by taking a direct action towards a cashless society. We must have access to cash, and it is at the heart of communities to have access to cash through their credit union or their post office, and indeed the access is provided to our SMEs as well, who are vital to our local economy.
Thank you, Deputy.